exactly 2:13 every morning, an 8-year-old girl woke to the sound of someone crying inside the walls of her house. When she finally told the police where the voice was coming from, they thought she was describing an imaginary friend. By sunrise, they were tearing apart one of the oldest homes in Apalachicola. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found us. We explore unsettling stories that blur the line between family tragedy and true horror. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and remember that tonight's story contains disturbing themes involving family secrets, trauma, and psychological horror. There are certain stories that never really leave you. This is one of those stories for me. I've replayed it in my head more times than I can count, trying to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Even now, I'm still not sure whether what happened inside that old house can be explained by human cruelty alone. This happened in Apalachicola, Florida. The stories families don't tell, the ones whispered only after funerals, the ones people convince themselves are better left buried. At the center of this story was a man named Daniel Ware. If you had asked anyone around town about him a few years ago, they probably would have described him as hardworking, dependable, and devoted to his daughter. He repaired marine engines near the Apalachicola River, spent Sunday afternoons walking through Battery Park with 8-year-old Emily, and treated her to fried shrimp at the Owl Cafe whenever she earned a good report from school. To everyone else, Daniel looked like a father doing his best after losing his wife, Claire, during a violent coastal storm 3 years earlier. No body had ever been recovered. People accepted it. Storms have a way of taking people without giving them back. Emily was quiet after her mother's disappearance, but no one thought much of that. Grief changes children in different ways. Some cry, some become withdrawn. Others begin carrying burdens they don't yet have the words to explain. For a long time, everyone believed that was all Emily was experiencing. Then Daniel inherited the Orman House. Some neighbors congratulated him. Others simply looked at the house and said nothing. The Orman House had stood over Apalachicola for generations. Beautiful from the outside, historic, elegant. But it had collected rumors the way old wood collects moisture. People spoke about strange noises, locked rooms, families who never stayed very long. Daniel laughed every one of those stories away. He called them old town gossip. At first, it seemed like he was right. The move went smoothly. Emily unpacked her room. Life continued almost exactly as it had before. Then, just a few nights after they settled into the house, something happened that no one, not even the police officers who would eventually respond to that address, could ever explain. Every night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the house woke up, and so did Emily. That was the beginning of everything, long before the hidden room, before the desperate phone calls, before a frightened little girl stood barefoot in the hallway pointing at a blue door and calmly told 2 officers that her father was hiding her real mother inside the walls. To understand how any of that became possible, we have to go back to the day Daniel Ware unlocked the front door of the Orman House for the very first time. At first, Emily tried to convince herself the strange things were only dreams. But after waking me night after night at exactly 2:13 a.m., she realized the house followed a pattern. It was never random. Every terrifying sound came after rain. Every whisper came when the old wooden walls were damp, as if the house itself had been waiting for the storms. Without telling her father, she began carrying a small spiral notebook everywhere she went. She wrote down every detail she could remember: the time the hallway felt ice cold, the nights she heard footsteps overhead, the moments the old telephone rang with no one speaking except a woman quietly sobbing. Every page ended the same way. 2:13 a.m. Emily knew she needed answers that weren't inside the house. One Saturday afternoon, while Daniel worked late at his marine repair shop, she wandered through the Rainy House Museum, where an elderly volunteer noticed her staring at an old photograph of the Orman House. The woman lowered her voice before speaking. "You've been staying there, haven't you?" Emily nodded. The volunteer glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "That house has a history folks don't like talking about. Over the years, several women connected to it simply disappeared. Official records blamed sickness, accidents, even storms. But the older families around here never believed those stories." Before Emily could ask another question, the volunteer quietly excused herself, leaving her alone with the faded photograph. The warnings didn't stop there. The following afternoon, Emily sat alone beneath the oak trees in Battery Park. One tree stood apart from the others. Its branches were full of leaves, but the ground beneath it was covered in lifeless brown grass, as though nothing healthy could survive there. An old fisherman walked past, stopped beside her without looking up, and quietly asked, "Has the blue room opened again?" Emily felt her heart stop. "What blue room?" The man simply continued walking until he disappeared along the waterfront. Back at the Orman House, the activity grew worse. Bedroom doors drifted open by themselves. Family portraits hung in different places each morning. Heavy footsteps echoed across the upstairs floor, even though Daniel insisted no one had been up there for years. Then, one rainy night, Emily heard the voice she had missed more than anything. Soft, gentle, almost impossible. "Emily, sweetheart, I follow my voice." She followed it into the hallway and froze. Fresh, muddy footprints stretched across the hardwood floor, ending directly in front of the blue door. When Daniel came downstairs moments later, his boots were perfectly clean. Emily needed proof. The next evening, she secretly left a small camera recording the hallway before climbing into bed. The following morning, her hands shook as she watched the footage. Nothing moved for hours. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., a pale woman slowly appeared behind Emily. Her face was blurred beyond recognition. Her arms stretched toward the sleeping child. But just before her fingertips touched Emily's shoulder, the recording ended. Moments like these make you wonder how many frightening stories never get told because no one believes the person living through them. If this story is pulling you deeper into the mystery, kindly like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Now let's get back to the story. That night, Emily stole Daniel's key ring while he slept. She tried every key. None fit because the blue door had no lock, only solid wood. She pressed her ear against it. Someone was crying. Then, knock, knock, knock. 2, 3. Slow knocks answered from the other side. Those 3 slow knocks changed everything. Emily didn't sleep after that night. She lay awake until sunrise, listening to the old house breathe around her. Every creak in the walls sounded less like settling wood and more like someone trying to get out. As the days passed, something even stranger began happening. Memories started returning. At first, they came in flashes. A broken picture frame on the hallway floor, her mother crying, a man's voice yelling. She had always believed they were nightmares brought on by grief. Now, she wasn't so sure. One memory refused to leave her. She remembered being much younger, standing at the bottom of the staircase while someone screamed upstairs. She remembered running toward the sound before Daniel scooped her into his arms. He held her tightly and whispered the same sentence over and over. Mommy went away. For years, she had accepted those words as truth. Now they felt rehearsed, almost like something he had repeated until she believed it. Then, exactly 1 week after the mysterious camera recording, someone called 911 from the Orman House. The dispatcher traced the call. No one spoke, only a woman sobbing in the background. When officers arrived, Daniel answered the door wearing a calm smile. He apologized for the misunderstanding and insisted everything was fine. Emily had simply been struggling since losing her mother. One officer was preparing to leave when Emily quietly stepped into the hallway. She didn't look at the officers. She looked at the blue door. Then, in a voice so calm it chilled everyone standing there, she said, "He buried the first one under Battery Park." Silence swallowed the room. Daniel's face lost every trace of color. He immediately stepped between Emily and the officers. "She's confused," he said quickly. "She's been having nightmares." But the officers weren't listening anymore. One of them noticed the fresh scrape marks around the blue wall, as though someone had recently moved heavy furniture. When Daniel refused to step aside, they forced their way past him. The first swing of the pry bar cracked the old wood. The second broke through the hidden wall. Behind it wasn't another bedroom. It was a narrow staircase, disappearing into darkness. The smell reached them before the light did. Salt water, bleach, rotting wood. Something far worse beneath it all. The flashlight beams revealed faded family photographs nailed to the walls. Every woman's face had been violently scratched away. Every face except one, Claire Ware. At the bottom of the staircase sat a tiny brick chamber. A rusted cot rested against one wall. Curled beneath a thin blanket was a woman whose hair had turned gray long before her time. She looked up as the officers entered. Her lips trembled. When she saw Emily standing behind them, tears streamed down her face. She reached out with trembling hands and whispered, "He made you forget me." Emily couldn't breathe. Her mother hadn't drowned. She had been hidden all those years. Daniel turned and ran before anyone could stop him. The search for him lasted less than 2 hours. Officers found him beneath the old oak tree in Battery Park, clawing frantically at the earth with his bare hands as though trying to uncover or bury something before they arrived. They dug where he had been digging. Human remains were discovered just below the roots. Weeks later, DNA testing confirmed the impossible. The bones didn't belong to Claire. They belonged to Daniel's first wife, a woman no one in Apalachicola even knew had existed. As investigators searched Daniel's belongings, They uncovered hundreds of recordings saved on his phone. Some captured Claire crying in the darkness. Others recorded Daniel laughing while speaking to someone who never answered. Then they reached the final file. According to the timestamp, it had been recorded after Daniel was already sitting alone in a jail cell. The camera faced the now empty blue chamber. Several seconds passed in silence. Then, an unfamiliar woman's voice whispered, "There's another daughter." A child's voice answered from somewhere inside the darkness. Emily's voice, soft, certain. "I know." For a while, everyone believed the nightmare was finally over. Claire was taken to a hospital where doctors spent weeks treating years of starvation and abuse. Daniel Ware was denied bail and transferred to a state correctional facility to await trial. Emily, with no safe family left to care for her, was placed with a foster family several counties away. The Orman House was sealed. Evidence was collected. The hidden chamber was bricked shut. People in Apalachicola slowly returned to their routines, convincing themselves the horror had ended with Daniel's arrest. But every night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., something still happened inside that house. Security cameras installed by investigators continued recording movement. Night after night, officers reviewed the footage. The hallway remained empty. Then, the sealed blue doorway would slowly creak open on its own. No one stepped through. No shadow crossed the threshold. Yet faint children's laughter echoed through the empty passage before the door quietly closed again. The recordings defied every explanation. Months later, investigators allowed Emily to return to the Orman House one final time under police supervision to collect a few family photographs and personal belongings. She hadn't spoken much since her mother's rescue. As officers packed boxes downstairs, Emily wandered into the hallway without saying a word. She stopped in front of the wall that concealed the hidden chamber. She stared at it for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Barely above a whisper, she said, "She's waiting." The hallway fell silent. Then came the answer. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow scratches followed from inside the sealed wall. Every officer heard them. No one opened the chamber. Later that evening, Claire finally shared the truth she had kept buried beneath years of fear. Daniel, she explained, hadn't invented the darkness inside the Orman House. He had simply become part of it. Long before they moved into the historic home, women connected to the property had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Old journals mentioned voices inside the walls, missing daughters, families destroyed by secrets they refused to confront. Claire believed something ancient had attached itself to the house, a presence that fed on grief, lies, and broken families. Daniel hadn't created the evil. He had willingly fed it. As forensic experts continued reviewing every recording recovered from Daniel's phone, another terrifying detail emerged. The woman's voice pleading for help appeared in files recorded years before Claire supposedly drowned. Different dates, different victims. The same desperate voice. Investigators began to suspect that generations of families connected to the Orman House had experienced the same haunting. And somehow, every generation left behind one child who could still hear the voices calling from within the walls. Emily wasn't the first. She might not be the last. Stories like this linger because they leave us with questions that never receive satisfying answers. If you loved this story, Please don't scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. We've got more powerful, emotional stories coming your way, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. Before the investigation officially closed, detectives reviewed the final piece of evidence one last time. The camera showed the hidden chamber sitting amajacid. Dust drifted through the flashlight beam. Nothing moved. Then, without warning, the camera slowly turned toward the blue wall. A small hand reached out from the darkness. It wasn't Emily's. It wasn't Claire's. The screen went black just before the recording ended. A frightened child's voice whispered, "Daddy brought me here too." Today, the Orman House still stands in Apalachicola. Visitors photograph its elegant porches and historic architecture. Some tourists claim they've captured the image of a little girl wearing a yellow cardigan, silently watching from an upstairs window before vanishing between frames. Officially, the house is empty. Officially, no one has lived there since Daniel Ware's arrest. So explain this. Who still answers the telephone inside the Orman House every night at exactly 2:13 a.m.?